Week 3, benvenuti, and it is heating up in Serie A. As always, there's never a dull moment. Rafael is calling Di Canio a fascist on Twitter. It is all popping off. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory, and I'm joined by my very good friend Adam. Adam, how are we doing, man?
Very good, thank you. Yes, as you alluded to, Serie A is certainly hotting up. But what I think I love about it most in Game Week 3 is the fact that we've got a mishmash of clubs in that top 10 mix. You know, you've got the likes of Hellas Verona, we've got the likes of Torino, we've got the likes of all these other clubs that are doing spectacularly better than the likes of Milan, the likes of Fiorentina, the likes of Atalanta, the likes of Roma. We could go on, Rory, but yeah, great to have Serie A back this weekend again.
Yeah, the top 6 looks a bit mad at the moment. We've got Torino, Udinese, and Verona all in there.
Mental.
Absolutely love it. And we backed 2 of those teams at least, I think, to do quite well this year. So, pat on the back so far, mate. We're smashing it. So this weekend in Serie A, obviously, we will be talking about Lazio, Milan, the fallout, and Leao and Di Canio. We will be talking about... where's it gone? Oh God, we'll be talking. I'm going to edit this out.
Juve.
We'll be talking about Juve hosting Roma in a game that only really came to life in the last 5 minutes, but was quite interesting, I think, on a tactical point of view. It was chaos in Naples as Lukaku got his first goal and Suzuki saw red. And then we'll be talking about Inter terrifying everyone in the league as they made light work of Atalanta, and we'll finish with a little bit of a transfer window roundup. So, Adam, after this very quick break, let's jump into the Calcio. And we are back, and it's time to discuss Lazio 2, Milan 2. But before we get to the game, it was all about the pre-match. It was all about Fonseca. The lineup was leaked. Leao and Teo were not in the lineup, right? Obviously, we discussed it on the previous pod, Adam. Their performances left something to be desired. They were they were the main culprits, right? They were the ones that were kind of hammered for it the most. Before we get to the fallout and the game, do you think Fonseca was wise to do this? Do you think it was well done? How did you see it?
He needed to change something, right? I think he needed to stamp his authority as well, to show to certain players potentially that, you know, he's not going to stand for their kind of subpar performances. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, in particular, Leao and Hernandez are the ones to be culpable for this, but I think their performances were poor in the previous game round against Parma, and justifiably he had to kind of shake it up a bit, and I don't see anything wrong with it. It's more the fact that I think you can sense that there's this harmony amongst the camp. You know, they don't like it, and unfortunately, if that means it ruffles a few feathers and gets rid of some of the deadwood, so be it. I don't necessarily see that being the common theme, however, Rory, of Milan's fan sentiments. I get the sense that they see the football and they're not impressed. They're not seeing or sensing like an improvement on Pioli. There's definitely a cultural thing, as we alluded to in our previous pod, but I also think, like, when you look at the shape and the strategy that's on the pitch, and there doesn't seem to be much more improvement on the pitch. What I did see, however, Rory, was when they went to a more direct and quicker a threat in terms of their style of football, they seem to be more aggressive. They seem to be more on it. And certainly for that second goal, that was testament to how aggressive they can be on the ball, and they can be very threatening. It's just a shame they can't keep that intensity for the duration of the game. And I think there's an element of control that is lacking in this team. I think there's an element that they just don't know how to see games through. And it was very chalk and cheese, wasn't it, in terms of the halves as well? Because I think they were fortunate in the sense that Lazio probably run out of legs by the moment that they equalised at that point. And they're fortunate that they had a cooling break as well thereafter, because I think had there been no cooling break, then potentially Milan go on to potentially snatch it. And that would have been very much against the run of the game, because Lazio had done very well to get into a winning position. I felt like they were the team with the momentum going into it. And it was only because Fonseca saw that they were collapsing and they were leaving gaps that he made those quick 4 substitutions, which included Hernandez and Leao. And yeah, it worked for them. However, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen every time. Now, in 2 weeks' time, they've got the Milan derby. that's going to be a fascinating matchup. But in between that, they've got a game against Venezia as well. So Venezia is going to be an interesting match. Will that be the kind of catalyst or the kind of boards that they build upon? Maybe. I don't think so. I think they will get a result regardless, but I just worry about the fact that they turn up against an Inter side that will be hungry again. They'll be hungry to make sure that they press their dominance in these kind of derbies as well. And yeah, it'll be a fascinating game in itself because a lot of the talk has been about Milan, less so on Inter. So let's see. But yeah, from what I could see, Rory, in particular in the second half, I think Milan look like the Milan that we've seen in the last few game weeks. And it looks very disappointing. There were some good points. Tammy Abraham, I thought, had a good introduction to his game. But I think a lot of the kind of positives of this game, in particular, Rory, was how Lazio woke up in the second half. The performances from the likes of Guendouzi, who kind of was starting to ping balls, getting the likes of Dia involved, Castellanos as well, and Nuno Tavares. That was the Nuno Tavares that we all kind of thought there was a prospect.
Yeah.
This is the thing. It was, in fairness, those two crosses were incredible. Absolute delightful assists.
He's honestly, he's capable of absolute moments of genius and then just the most brain dead moments. He's a fascinating enigma of a player, Tavares. But it kind of highlighted an issue to me with Milan is that they just they couldn't address that issue, right? He was just absolutely tearing them to pieces. And they were just like, okay, well, we'll just keep doing the same thing. And there was no one none of the team was shifting across to help. There was no one kind of helping. Fonseca wasn't trying to deal with it. It was just absolute free run of that left wing, just completely bombing up and down. And I feel like Milan just didn't adapt to it quickly enough. I think that midfield really needs to be addressed because it was... Fofana, I think he looked decent first half, but we said it during the game, and then you said it on WhatsApp. He's looking a bit lost this second half. Reinders, we know he's a decent player, but I don't know if he's defensively stable enough for Fofana to be doing that job all on his own. With Loftus-Cheek in that more kind of advanced role, the defensive side of the game isn't really his thing anyway. That's not his job. I just don't know if the midfield has enough of that defensive solidity. And when you've got players like Pavlovic, I've been relatively impressed by, decent header from the corner, but him and Tomori defensively haven't had a fantastic start to the season, I think it's fair to say. So they definitely need a bit more protection. So I don't know whether getting rid of Benacer, or he's gone now, right? I don't know if that was the best decision. He was a player who obviously had his fitness issues, but for me was always very defensively solid. And when you look at the bench, the only other midfield option you see there where you think maybe they can tighten it up is Yunus Musa, who again is a decent player, but defensive isn't the main part of his role either. I think he's kind of more of a box-to-box midfielder from what I've seen. So I think that midfield needs to be sorted out to give a bit more defensive solidity, because especially when you're dropping a player like Theo Hernandez, who, defense isn't the strongest part of his game either, but it's someone who's so committed, does the running. Terracciano is a very exciting young player, but he struggled a lot in this game, especially when passing out from the back. There was a few moments where him and Maignan were just getting confused. The press from Lazio was forcing them into errors. And I think when you've got a young player there with a little bit of doubt and the centre-backs that aren't having a great start to the season, just that whole defensive side of the game just looked completely unbalanced. And then you've got Emerson Royale, who every week I will repeat, I do not know why they bloody signed him. He got caught out of position so many times. I just feel like he's a liability more than anything. So I think there's a lot of issues to be dealt with there at Milan. The interesting story coming out of this, there's two interesting stories if we look at it before we go to Lazio. The interesting story here, I think, is that technically Pioli is still employed by Milan.
Yeah.
So they haven't cancelled his contract. It's costing them I'm going to say this out loud, $1 million a month, I think it was.
Wow.
To pay him at the moment. I think I saw that, or $500,000 a month.
$500,000 seems more believable.
But it cost them a lot of money, right? And he's still not. So the contract is still technically running. And there are rumors in the papers here and on the TV shows that I've seen here that the Milan board aren't necessarily against bringing him back and getting rid of Fonseca because they're unimpressed with the start. Now, we've talked about how the football hasn't really moved on, the style hasn't really moved on. It kind of feels like Pioli's still here. Do you think Milan would do a Salernitana and just bring the guy back?
No, I can't. I can't see that. I think there would be just too much discontent if they brought back Pioli, just purely because I don't think the fans want that. They don't crave that. They want a change from that. And I think, and I sense this more on vibes here, Rory, but I sense that Zlatan probably doesn't want Pioli there as well. I think they want to have a clean slate from that period. They want to move on. They want to get someone. And I think the perfect candidate, personally, and he's available on a free, would be Maurizio Sarri. Someone that can instill a bit of a footballing philosophy, that can build with the team, will probably be given some money to get the types of players that he wants. The problem, I would say, Rory, is that you've already spent quite a bit already in this window, and you're going to have to, again, try and maybe change it around. But look, Sarri, I could see potentially doing quite well. Look, he's done fantastically well at Lazio. Unfortunately, the reason why he didn't push on was because of the funds. He didn't get the funds, and he didn't have a say on the transfer policy as well. Whereas I suspect in Milan, there'll be a lot more consolidation of thoughts in terms of who they get. However, that said, look, Cardinali didn't agree with Maldini in terms of the style of players that they would bring in either. So that could be another contentious point here with Sarri. But the other one, let's just bring it in while we're talking about it. Massimo Allegri, even.
Get him
Why
back.
not? Bring him back. He'll get this team playing, right?
He's going to be the elephant in the room for every single manager that's under threat in Serie A this year. It's going to be like just, Allegri's available.
Mad Max.
Allegri's
Mad Max is
available.
available.
It's going to be just like stood in the corner, the ghost at the feast for every manager who's under pressure. I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I can't see Fonseca lasting long, honestly. I feel like the writings, and it's only 3 games, but like you said, the Milan derby's coming up. That's going to be an absolute bloodbath. From what, like, it's not going to be pretty if you're a Milan supporter, I think. And at that point, you're really looking like you're struggling. Yeah, I just think Milan had the opportunity to kill this game off, but the second half, they were just so bad and just let Lazio back into it. But we need to give Lazio some credit. Baroni is having a kind of quiet start to the season with Lazio, but this is the first performance, or the second half performance in particular, where I was like, okay, we're seeing something here. Lazio are looking threatening, alive, attacking. As you said, Guendouzi outstanding, which he can be on his day. Tavares outstanding, which he can be on his day. But the player that stood out for me was Boulaye Dia. Now, obviously, he was fantastic at Salernitana. I really like the partnership that seems to be forming between him and Castellanos. You've got the kind of big man, little man to an extent, even though Dia is a big lad. Castellanos is definitely a bit taller. Dia does a lot of running. And he's really direct with the ball, a constant threat. And I just like that they seem to be playing off each other quite well. So there could be a really exciting partnership there. And like going back to like a 4-4-2 is quite exciting, right? It's been a while since we've seen a 4-4-2, but I don't hate it. What were your standouts from Lazio? Because the second half, they were fantastic, right?
They were superb. I think in the middle of the park, as you allude to, Guendouzi with his pinging of the balls, I think his link-up play was really good. Ravella as well. We know about his credentials. Unfortunately, we just never saw it flourish, I don't think, enough. So, again, that was really promising. But yeah, as you allude to, I think it is what you've already said. Boulaye Dia, he kind of stretched and helped kind of combat with and tag team almost at the same time with Titi Castanos in that kind of attacking third. And between Pavlovic and Tomori, they were lost. They really were lost. Pavlovic did really well on occasions, however, not helped by the wing backs in Terracciano and Emerson Royale. So yeah, I think they just were a constant menace. And like you say, it's nice to have 4-4-2 back because unfortunately, I feel teams have adapted to almost playing one solitary striker. And that sometimes doesn't actually suit the style of players that you've got at that club as well. So I think this is a really good contrast in that respect. And Baroni, look, I know we've kind of liked him from his days at Lecce and what he achieved at Hellas. This is a big test for his kind of credentials as well. A bigger club, a bit more stature, a bit more in terms of what he can potentially be at risk here as well for his career. and he's doing phenomenally well. I think he's the right fit for that club. And yeah, although it's steady, I think they will push on. I don't think it might not be this season. It might be next season. However, yeah, you get the sense that this is a relationship that both the club as well as him really like. They really like this project. So let's see if they can push on, Rory.
It could finally be the right manager for Lazio because he doesn't demand a budget, Baroni.
Exactly.
He's very good at working with what he's got. And I think if there's anything Lotito loves, is someone who doesn't want to spend money. So I think it could really, really work well.
100%.
And yeah, I was quite encouraged by this performance for Lazio. Good times. Milan looking in trouble. The next game. Oh no, we need to talk about
the other
post-match.
Other point first.
Post-match. So obviously the big talking point in this match was the cooling break, right? As with all great football matches, we talk about the cooling break. And of course, Teo and Leao decided to stand separate from the team as Fonseca was trying to give some kind of team talk, tactical instructions. It feels like basically football is 4 quarters now, right? But I'm not going to turn into a boomer and complain about it. That's just the way it's going. But obviously they stood separately in a sulk. Di Canio on the post-match or on one of the, I think it was the post-match, he said, if this happened in your after work, like calcetto, like 5-a-side game with 2 people that you worked with, it would be like horrendous. Like you would be angry with them. You would be shouting at them like, this is not how adults behave. If this happened when I was playing, which is always a great start to the sentence,
of course,
back in my day, right? If this had happened when I was playing, they would have been pinned up against the wall and I would have punched them. Now, I completely believe every word that Canio is saying there, by the way. I believe that he would have punched them.
Probably.
Now, Leao, who always isn't really shy about these things, went onto Twitter and just posted a picture of Di Canio doing the Roman salute under the Lazio curva with just like the 3 full stops. I love this about Serie A. Like in someone, someone made a really good point. Like in the Premier League, if this happened, there would be like a really PR heavy agent written note apologizing to the fans and saying like, I don't think it's fair, the criticism that's been leveled at me, but we promised to give more, we go again kind of thing. In Serie A, it's just a player on his phone, boom, you're a fascist, let's just set fire to the furniture, right? But I think Leao isn't necessarily in the wrong in this instance, right? I think obviously how he's conducted himself, I mean with the social media post, right? Like Di Canio's a dick, right? Di Canio is a fascist. How he's still on TV in Italy for me is mind-blowing. Like it's odd that he's on Sky Sports adverts and stuff, right? It's just really weird. He's openly a fascist, big fan of Benito, right? So I think I don't blame Leao for just being like, no, fuck, I'm not listening to this guy, right? Yeah. But Leao and Teo should be conducting themselves better than this, right? Like they are meant to be the leaders of the changing room. They're the 2 highest paid players. I'm pretty sure they haven't been playing well. Like, are you disappointed by their response? Disappointed but not surprised? That's kind of how I felt.
I'm actually quite happy that there's a bit more human element to these responses. Personally, I think it's really exciting personally because actually that's the personality that you sometimes you think with the modern footballer we're missing these days, right? So I'm glad that he stood up for what he believed in that sense. Whether that was the right kind of thing to have posted, I don't know. But all I would say, though, is that Rafael Leao has come under a lot of criticism, not just from obviously Milan fans, but also from the media about his performances. And I think he's probably got to a point where he's just really annoyed with it constantly aimed at him when it's not necessarily about him. Yes, he is still a player that is kind of seen in high regard, but ultimately there seems to be a lot of pressure on him to deliver. And yes, there is an argument that if he wants to be kind of considered as the star of the show down there, he needs to deliver on a more consistent basis. But look, ultimately, he's still developing as a player. look, he probably knows himself he's still not the finished player or article in that respect. So look, I think he's probably just relaying a lot of the stresses that he's had of late onto Canio personally, and just went very cleverly, let's get that picture off Google and post it in one of my responses. Fair play to him. That's all I've got to say. I think that's a really clever response from his point of view. He could have been much more argumentative with Di Canio as well, right? But he went about it in the most childish way that you could possibly do, but still funny from a Serie A perspective. It's beautiful.
There's nothing that Di Canio can say to it either. You know what I mean? There's like, there's no response. It's just like, oh,
you can't even defend it. You did it. It was you that did it.
It's impossible. So yeah, I was going to say, like, you know, Leao needs to do his talking on the pitch, but he did come on and score after 2 minutes being on the pitch, right? He did kind of do his talking on the pitch as well. Obviously, we all want him to be more consistent, but I think you're right. He does get like, it's not necessarily his fault that Milan's only consistent attacking threat is him and all the pressure is on him, right? They've not really surrounded him with players that can really support him and are of his level. I think even the angriest Milan fan that is sick of Leao would say, yeah, okay, he needs a bit of help, right? Yeah. He can't be expected to score every game. He can't be expected to win every game for them. But as always, six of one, half a dozen of the other. I think at times he does get distracted. We've talked about in the past how he just loses his way and disappears in seasons. I just hope that now this is a bit of a wake-up call and he kicks on and continues to do his talking on the pitch. For Teo, obviously, he's just a very, very difficult person. But he is the club captain. He is like an icon of the club and he is your best player. So I think you have to like, I kind of compared it, I think when we were talking during the game, I compared it to when Ten Hag, he always pops up, when he dropped Rashford and then pulled him off the bench when they were losing. I was like, oh, it doesn't really have the same effect when you bring him on when you're losing.
No, exactly.
Like, I'm angry with you, but can you save me, please? Because I might get sacked. And I kind of got that vibe with this of like, oh, fuck, we're losing. Okay, just chuck them both on. I think if you're going to drop them, like, drop them and deal with the consequences and stand by your principles, right? Whereas I feel here he's just done neither, and Leao's just scored and been like, see, you do need me, right? So I think this again makes Fonseca's position a little bit more untenable. But we will see. Yeah. Maybe he will be in charge for the Milan derby. It'll be a fun one. I think Tommy is really looking forward to it.
He's looking for it. I bet he's rubbing his hands.
Yeah. Or the Inter side of this city is very, very excited at the moment. But let's move to the second game we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about, it was a banger, guys. It was 0-0. It was Serie A heritage. Juve 0, Roma 0. Adam, why is this game so high up in the running order?
It is high because I think we both agree that Juventus are starting to cooking, as I alluded to last week. The style of football is definitely pleasing on the eye at the moment. Motta's got them turned around in terms of the footballing philosophy, and they're creating really good football at the moment. On the other hand, we've got Roma, who desperately need to get a lot of points on the board, but they were very much counter-attacking, very much backs to the wall kind of stuff, really well marshaled by Mancini and Ndicka in the center of defense, and not helped by the rest of the team, to be honest. However, good kind of performance from a backline point of view. And in the last 5 minutes of that game, when De Rossi had made substitutions about 5 minutes earlier, actually changed the complexity of the match, because it actually looked like that Roma were going to nick a win in Turin. So it was a fascinating game because it was very much end to end by the end of it. And yeah, I think there's a lot to kind of talk about, right, Rory? Because I think, shall we start off with Juventus and talk about how well they played? I think you made the comment in our group about how it's weird to kind of say that this is an exciting Juventus side, but they are genuinely really good in terms of attacking foil, in terms of the way they're going about it. However, it's that end products. And this is the point that I made a few weeks ago around Vlahovic. He needs to be more clinical. He needs to be kind of getting himself a bit more ruthless in the box. And on this occasion, we saw what I think we've seen for the last few seasons at Juventus, where it comes against the bigger sides and he struggles. That said, however, the likes of Yildiz, for example, who is supposed to be his number 10, didn't really cover himself in much glory because he couldn't finish his opportunities either. And I think this could be the issue that Juventus and Motta face, is that whilst they are really attractive on the eyes, they're not turning those kind of games where they dominate possessions, dominate the XG. They're not turning those into wins. And at some point, we'll see the Juventus fan base go absolutely apeshit because they're not getting results, right? And I'm there for it, Rory. I'm going to be sat here with my popcorn to watch this happen. But at the same time, you can already see this is what's going to happen with Juventus. So my question to you is, do you think this is just a one-off game, or do you think this is something that Motta should be concerned about?
I think, look, they've scored 6 goals this season so far. So they put 3 past Como and 3 past Verona. Now, as much as we love Verona, and as much as Como is a very romantic story, neither of those teams are going to be very high up the league, right? I think this is the first time they've faced a team that's going to be pushing, right? That's going to be in that European race. They saw the difference, and they saw that you're going to need that little bit extra. And I think in the past, since I've been making this podcast, or since we've been making this podcast, every time I've watched Juventus, it's been out of duty, right? It's like, I need to watch Juve because it's Juve, and I'm just going to have to sit and watch this 90 minutes and just get through it, right? And in the last 3 games, I've been like, I actually didn't hate all of that, right? Some of that I actually enjoyed. So I think this is like the big improvement for Juve. With this particular game, Roma defended incredibly well. They came with a very, very clear game plan. And I think Motta hasn't really come up against teams that fully sat back against him, right? So when it was Bologna, when you go to Juve, when you go to Roma, when you go to Napoli, they're not sitting back and defending against Bologna. They're going, we need to win this game. It's Bologna, right? Whereas now he's turning up with Juve, and the big teams and the little teams, even though they've done well against Como and Verona, the teams around them are going to go, no, you know what, we'll just sit back a little bit and we'll make sure we're defensively solid before we go and do anything else. So I think it's something that Motta is going to have to figure out, how to coach that team to get past that mid-block, low block kind of thing. Like, how can he adapt his tactics and get the best out of his attackers to do that? Because I think it was a little bit easy at times for Roma. I don't think Juve pushed them as much as they could have done. Part of that also is with players like Yildiz and Savona. Like, these are young players, right? They've had very good starts, but with young players, you're going to have inconsistencies. They're not going to be amazing every week. That's part of the risk of playing young players. So I think that's part of it as well. I don't think it's alarming for Juve at this rate. Look, they've won 3-0, 3-0 and drawn 0-0. They've still not conceded a goal. Like, it's insane. It's a very good start to the season. I just think there was a little bit of a flashpoint, especially with Vlahovic, where you think, we know he's a player that relies quite heavily on confidence. And there was times in that game where you could see his temperament getting lost a little bit, and you could see him getting frustrated and getting like snatching at chances. And you just, if you're a Juve fan, you don't want that to continue too long, right? You want to make sure that the next game he gets a goal, because otherwise it's 2 games, 3 games, and we know that Vlahovic can go on these stretches. I don't think it was a horrendous performance from him. I think, as you said, Indica and Mancini are forming quite a nice little partnership there. They're both decent. As much as Mancini's a dickhead, he's a decent centre-back.
He's a good centre-back, I'd say, yeah.
So, like, it wouldn't be an easy day at the office anyway, but I think Motta just needs to see how he can change this team to get past those low blocks, mid block, because it's something he might not have faced before. But in terms of the entertainment, I honestly think Juve are just playing such attractive football, and it's something that can really, like, it just change, just trying to pass nicely, and some nice,
it's exciting,
some nice little 1-2s, and some, like, the thing that really impressed me as well was the passes from deep, quick out wide for the wingers to get on, and just not the counter-attacking like Allegri, where it's just like 11 behind the ball and then sprint. It's like well-structured, fast, dynamic, exactly, like choreographed moves where you can see the structure, the triangles. And I just really, really enjoyed watching it. I was like, God damn, I'm actually enjoying Juventus. Damn it, Thiago, what are you doing to me? This was not supposed to happen. So I think it could be a really exciting season for Juve, honestly. And I think we've talked about, if you check out our Premier League episode, we were talking about Arne Slot coming in and doing such a good job at Liverpool instantly. I feel like Thiago Motta he's getting his ideas across quickly to this team. Like the
Mhm.
turnaround is insane. If you sit and watch the last Allegri match now, go back and watch that, and then watch this game, you won't recognize the players. And it's basically the same squad. Like McKennie's still there. Like a lot of the players are still there.
They are, but I think that's mixed in with a lot of younger prospects in this team that are more receptacle to change. They're more open to ideas, and I think that was kind of definitely seen in the likes of Savona, as you mentioned previously. But players like Chico Conceição, he was getting into those positions constantly, trying to work out opportunities. I did make an observation. I felt Cop Miners was trying almost too hard. But I think his mission was to try and lay it on a plate for the likes of Vlahovic, etc., to score that goal. And I felt almost, I don't know whether you feel the same way, but the balance of Cop Miners alongside his kind of midfield players like Fagioli, for example, were just getting a slightly bit in the way of each other because they were kind of like, right, I need to pass it to someone, but actually I don't know who I'm supposed to pass it to because the main man is being marked out with Mancini and Ndicka being incredible. So I think they are missing that kind of play. And I was personally surprised we didn't see Nicky Gonzalez, who was signed from Fiorentina. I think he's a player that can just turn it on a pace when needed. So yeah, surprised from that point of view, Rory. But if we twist this now to Roma, we've already identified in the early stages have struggled, and it didn't look like any of the players that they brought in this summer have pushed on again in this match. Sule in particular, for me, was disappointing, but Dovbyk really struggles against the likes of Gatti. I felt like he needs to start being a bit more demanding of centre-backs, and I know he's playing the kind of solitary man up top, but he needs to be really pushing the defenders and creating spaces. If it's not for himself, then for his other teammates as well. But I also feel like Pellegrini's lost in this system. I think he slows down the tempo of the game, and it was noticeable when both and also all three of them, ironically, it all came off. And as soon as they came off, they seemed a lot more fluid. They seemed to be a lot more running. The likes of Dybala seemed to have a little bit of freedom. Zalewski, I thought, had an impressive cameo in this game. And they were unlucky. Angelino having a shot almost creeped into Gregorio's goal as well. I mean, these are the kind of differences. And I suppose I posed this as a question because I posed it to one of the Roma fans that I noticed on Twitter and asked his opinion. And he is of the same opinion that I suppose Pellegrini is an enigma in some respects. They don't really know what he can do. And with Dovbyk, the kind of perception is that he will come good. However, he does need a goal. Agreed that he needs to get a goal as soon as possible. But the point I'm trying to make is I think you get to a point in the season where you've tried to get these players into the system. Is it time for De Rossi now to maybe make the changes and have the players that fit the system, or do you just change the formation?
I think a little bit more patience with Dovbyk is going to pay off. I think there's a lot of players, like if you look at like Selemakers has come in this season, right? Sula has come in this season. Dovbyk has come in this season. That's your three main attackers in this game around Pellegrini, right? That's three players who have to get used to playing with each other. They have to get used to playing in a new system. I think it's what we talked about the episode before. Dovbyk thrives on crosses. You have to get crosses into the box. But they don't have that natural width. I feel like Seilemakers is a little bit of a wider player, so he'll be able to figure out a little bit quicker. I think the formation isn't the issue for Roma. I genuinely don't think it is. They just need to try and get a little bit more width and work to Dovbyk's strengths. Now, obviously, it's difficult to kind of dictate your whole attacking play when he hasn't scored yet, right? Sure. If he gets a goal, you're like, okay, yeah, no, this is it, right? This is like build all that around it. But that's how you get the best out of him. He's a big physical lad. He gets on the end of crosses. If you're playing smart balls into his feet, I don't know how well he's going to do with it, right? So I think they have to just persevere a little bit more with this and just try and hammer home with Saelemaekers, Sula, Zalewski, whoever it is they decide it's going to be, Dybala. You need to get out wide and get that ball across. I think this international break, even though a lot of the players will be going off with their respective teams, I think it will be a really useful time for De Rossi and his staff to sit down, look, see what's been going wrong and how they can work out this attack. And with the players that are remaining, maybe try and figure out, okay, iron out a few kinks. I think this is a good, like, as annoying as it is for the fans, the managers are actually probably quite happy with this international break of like, okay, we've got 3 games. We've got enough of like a test group to look back at and go, okay, what do we need to improve on? What do we need to like strengthen? So I think a little bit more patience, it will all be fine for Roma. I think with the optimist's hat, I think it's encouraging that you can bring players off the bench and it completely transform your performance, right? Like if you're looking, because Roma looked like they weren't really going to score in a month of Sundays, and then they made the substitutions, and I was like, that meme of the guy with the controller, and then you just sit forward. I was like, oh my God, this could actually happen, right? Like all of a sudden you had the pace, you had Dybala, Baldanzi, Zalewski, Shomorodov, right? All of a sudden it was like they were just piling forward. Juve were just, you saw Gatti like panicking and trying to get everybody up. Like guys were going, concentrate. Di Gregorio was having to come out and claim crosses. Like it was just, it felt like Roma would, it was a matter of seconds before
inevitable.
Yeah. And I think that's a really encouraging sign of that you've got the depth off the bench that even if, okay, you wouldn't, it was 0-0. I think Roma would have taken that before the game. You're going to get a 0-0 at Juve? Yeah, cool. Deal. See you next year, right?
Yeah.
But I think having that strength in depth off the bench is a really encouraging sign for Roma, because I don't think every team has that. And there's a lot of players that we laugh about Shomorodov, right? He doesn't score often, but he is a player that brings something different, right? Yes. Zalewski, we talked about like the pace and his running. He's going to cause people problems. Like if you're a wing back who's been playing for 90 minutes and you see him coming on, you're going to, for fuck's sake, this is like, can you not just blow the constant, right? This is going to just get me out of here. Like, and I think I really think that's a positive sign for Roma. And the fact that, De Rossi has that ability to be like, okay, this isn't working. Now we can try it. Because I think he waited a little bit long in this game, but I think he waited that long on purpose because he would have been happy with a draw. He was just like, for the last 5 minutes, okay, fuck it, let's just see if we can nick it. But I think having that option in your back pocket is going to be very useful, because that bench it's not a bad bench, I don't think. There's still Paredes, and there's some players on there that can still come on and make a difference. So I think, looking like a low-key, pretty strong squad.
Yeah.
But then for Juve, if you look at the players that came on, it's mental. You got Conceição, Koopmeiners. Gonzalez came on for 7 minutes, a little bit late. I think he could have done with coming on a bit earlier. McKennie and Douglas Luiz, that is strong players coming off the bench there. So I think 2 very strong squads, but I think overall both of them were pretty happy with a draw at the end. Just take it, move on. Nothing lost, nothing gained. And an interesting game, tactically very interesting, even if there wasn't any goals. Sometimes you have to find the interesting thing, listener. Sometimes you have to really look for the interesting thing. It makes it more worth it. It makes it more rewarding. Next, let's go for the game where you didn't have to look far for entertainment. We're going to go to the Stadio Diego Maradona, as it was Napoli 2, Parma 1. Adam, Parma continue to bring the entertainment.
Beautiful.
It kind of shot themselves in the foot here, but they had Napoli on the ropes, 1-0 up, playing well. It was going so well.
It was going so well in this particular match. And I think on the balance of the play, Rory, I really liked what I saw. Fabio Peccio, with the kind of style of football that they've brought so far, they gave a debut to Mateusz Kowalski, who's a 19-year-old Pole, for the touches that he had. Looked promising. Obviously, Mihaela as well as Man still causing their usual disruption in terms of their wing play. But Bone in particular took the kind of eye for me. He was really kind of forceful, really direct, and was just a constant menace for that kind of Napoli backline. I know Buongiorno did well in this particular match, but Meret brings down Bono to concede the initial penalty to Parma. Bono steps up, tucks it away, and you're thinking, right, Parma in comfortable position. But as you allude to, Zion Suzuki, who already had a yellow card, brings down David Neres, and unfortunately he's sent off. So subsequently they have to make the change. They put one of their players into goal. And from that moment onwards, they were just holding on as best as they could. They used the experienced men as much as they could. I think in some respects, this was an interesting one from a Conte perspective because it actually taught him a lot about his players and how they struggled to break down teams as well. However, the breakthrough did eventually happen in the second minute of the 11th added injury time minutes. Lukaku steps up and tucks away. And then only a couple minutes there later, crossed into the box, and Zongo Anguissa gets his head onto it, and the whole of Diego Maradona's stadium erupts. And what a fascinating game it was in the end, because Napoli did deserve it from a pressure perspective. However, I felt they did struggle against Parma. Had Parma had 11 men, who knows? Maybe they would have gone out with a famous fixture, or maybe a draw in the end. But inevitably, Lukaku steps up and strengthens that relationship that he has with Conte. I'm sure he's got pictures of Conte in a derogatory way, but them two obviously have a great relationship. The fascinating stat about Lukaku, though, he's accumulated £417 million worth of transfer in his career, which is, crazy for the amount of expenditures that he's had in that time. It's absolutely mental. But Rory, what did you make of this performance yourself?
I think look, both the goals came when there was a midfielder, I think it is, in goal, which says a lot, right? Like both of the, because there was a moment when, like, the finish from Lukaku was a fantastic finish, and the header from Anguissa was a fantastic header. But there was a moment where, at the death, Parma had a header, I think, at the end, and Meret made an incredible save. And I saw, like, in contrast, how the non-goalkeeper tried to save the shots, and then how Meret made that save. And I was like, goalkeeper, they just do know how to do this, right? And I feel like that was kind of the difference. But I have to say, Napoli hit the bar and crossbar so many times in this game. Like, I feel like they had a lot of chances. They should have had this game put away a bit earlier. They just wanted to make it exciting for the home crowd. But I think, look, Parma really are, you're right. They're really making a really good account of themselves. They're playing some good football. They're making it difficult for teams. I just think that Suzuki tackle is like, it's just a proper rush of blood to the head, isn't it, really?
Unfortunately.
And you're just like, you can't defend that. And when he was kind of like, huh? No, you're like, mate, just walk and just go. Like, it's a red card. It's the most blatant red card going. And then he took his head off. But let's talk about it more widely, because Napoli is fun at the moment. Conte and Lukaku, it is incredible the relationship they have there. It's like a test case in psychology, Lukaku. I feel like he'd be a most fascinating footballer post-career to look back and be like, how much sports psychology is key in an athlete's performance. Because when he's with a manager who he loves, who loves him, who makes him feel like the big boy, whatever, he just turns into an absolute monster. Like, obviously, this is his first goal. It's only one goal. It was against not a goalkeeper, but it was a hell of a finish. And you could see that he had that, like, for want of a better word, that kind of, aura, the swagger about him, where it's like, push the defender off, turn, spin, no second thought, no, like, just absolute instinct, rocket. And you're like, he's going to score a lot of goals this year. And all of a sudden, for my Fantacalcio draft, I'm like, okay, Lukaku has just shifted up a few notches in who I might want this season. So it's fascinating how he manages to get the best out of him consistently. But Napoli was starting to see, obviously, that first performance now feels like a bit of a freak result, right? And the players have been scared into a performance because the quality all round, you can see what they're trying to do. You can see the system. And I think that midfield, like, Anguissa was outstanding this game. Like, outstanding. He felt like classic Anguissa again. Alongside Lobotka, really think, like, we know that's a good midfield. Like, that's the midfield that won the bloody Scudetto, right? Alongside Zielinski. Like, we know that is a good partnership. Buongiorno looks like the most obvious business this summer. Like, he has just come in and you just... I think he could be the signing of the... I think we might have said it in the previews episode. I can't remember. But he looks like he's going to be signing of the season. Just the calmness on the ball, the ability to carry the ball, his passing, let alone his defensive ability, his positioning, reading the game, just looks instantly, okay, you're alongside Rahmani, so you're going to look incredible anyway. But
Yeah, of
he
course.
really does look absolutely fantastic. But you said, and I think you made a fair point with Matsaki, it's not quite clicking with him yet, right?
I just feel like he's not maybe the quality that Napoli maybe naturally strive for. When we compare Buongiorno, for example, we can see that's the kind of caliber of players that maybe they should have attracted last summer. And this is the difference that we're talking about. If you're talking about instantly upgrading your team, Mazzocchi doesn't necessarily do it. However, what I will give for him, he loves the team. He will give it his all. And I think that's why Conte persist with him, because he is someone that is born there and he will give his 100% effort. And that's the difference, I suppose. Conte's always had that within his sides. He's always had those players that are maybe not fancied by the general consensus of fans, but they can see that they give it their all. And you could see even when he came off as a substitute, he's running his heart out so he can get the next player to have an opportunity on the pitch. So for me, Mazzocchi is not necessarily the player that I would play. I just think that's the gap in terms of quality, and he has to deal with that. I would also say I think there's opportunities within that midfield where when Anguissa isn't on his A game, I think there's an opportunity to exploit that midfield. However, that's for another day for Conte to deal with, I think. But yeah, on this particular day, they did really well against Parma, and given the circumstances, like you say, Buongiorno hitting the crossbar from one of the efforts as well. Yeah, very unlucky from a Napoli perspective that they didn't win by more. However, yeah, the Napoli fan base will be happy with the way they went about it. And this in the midst of Victor Osimhen also recently potentially going off to Galatasaray, only to find out that De Laurentiis is going to make sure that he signs another contract with the club to ensure that he doesn't lose the asset to any dodgy deals, shall we say. So yeah, it looks like that relationship has been burned by courtesy of his agent, and his agent might be regretting doing any deals with De Laurentiis. How do you read of that situation?
If I'm also now, I read it was an article from a African football journalist. I forgot the name. Sorry, and he was talking about the kind of the mess that was the last 24 hours for Osimhen in the transfer window. And there was rumors of him with his agent like punching walls and doors and tables and really losing his fucking mind at how like you promised me this big move. I've been quite public. We've both been quite public in how this big move is coming and it's not materialized. I think it's how not to manage a career. Honestly, you've gone from a striker who any club in Europe would have taken and would have spent a lot of money on, to giving away to the Turkish Super League and begging for someone to pay the wages. And I think it's like, if I'm Osimhen, I'm sacking the agent yesterday. I'm just like, right, you're done. Like, thank you, goodbye. Like, I think when you're coming up against De Laurentiis, who is a very wily operator in these things, right? He's a very good negotiator. He doesn't take any shit. What he wants, he gets. You've got to come better than my player's really good. Like, you have to have better than that, right? And I think it's a real shame because you've got one of the best strikers in the world who's now hunting around for a club desperately and is going to be out. He's going to be like, there are so many teams in the world that need Victor Osimhen. Like,
Exactly.
Arsenal need Victor Osimhen. Chelsea need Victor Osimhen, right? There are so many teams that could be like, Barcelona need fucking Victor Osimhen. Like, but he's going to Galatasaray because his agent has just fumbled the bag really hard. And I think it's really fascinating. I think if he does sign that extension, which it looks like he has to because De Laurentiis isn't going to back down, then he could come back to Napoli and still have 2 years on the contract and nobody want to pay that money. Like, in a way, I respect Osimhen for not going to Saudi Arabia and being like, no, I don't want to go there and just give up my career, right? I want to still be at the top of European football. I just don't understand why he hasn't sacked his agent yet, because honestly, it would just be gone. But it's a real shame. It's a real shame that it just that legacy of that Scudetto team is just disintegrated beyond belief.
Yeah,
It's incredible.
it's
Like,
incredible.
I don't think any of the players the fans will look back on fondly anymore, really. They'll just be, oh, that prick, he left for Inter on a free. That guy couldn't wait to get out of the club. Like, it's just all disintegrated. Really impressive from De Laurentiis, really, to do that. But let's move on from Napoli and Parma. And let's go to the last game we're going to talk about today before we go to some transfer business. And we're going to talk about the absolutely petrifying performance by Inter as they swept Atalanta 4-0 at home. I checked my phone and this game was done. Like, it just seemed like Inter were there to get the job done early. 10 minutes, 2-0 up, out of there, right? It was just one of the most... This was like... I feel like Inter have had a slow start for them to the season. You know, the draw against Genoa, kind of creaking forward. Then all of a sudden, bang, this is it, right? Inter have arrived.
Yeah, pretty much. And typified, I suppose, by the intensity that the likes of Marcus Thuram just put on the Atalanta defence, and a very uncharacteristic performance by Atalanta in some respects, because they just didn't bring that same intensity to this match. They seemed to just fold quite easily, but a lot of credit to the way that Inter approached it. They did not give them a moment to kind of settle down. And I think that was the difference, really, that if you give Atalanta too much respect, they will take the game to you. However, Simeone and Inzaghi approached it in the right way, with the application of the players on the pitch. That volley from Nicolo Barella is just phenomenal. And what I learned since, Rory, is that he's obviously not going to be part of the Italian national squad because he's got a nasal injury. So he couldn't even breathe properly when he was doing that volley. Yet he could still produce that kind of magnificence. And it's just incredible that he can do that. So he's off to do some nasal surgery. He'll be back in time for the Milan derby, no doubt. So, but it's just crazy to think that these players are playing through these kind of things and still putting performances like that. And you wouldn't have even known that he was playing with a nasal issue. But yeah, this is the quality that this squad exudes at the moment. And I feel sometimes that they're not under enough pressure, you know, like Di Marco. I don't feel he's got like someone that is chasing his position. But yeah, he still puts in a performance like he did against Atalanta as well. So a lot of the plaudits is around Thuram, because Thuram's kind of hat trick. I know Jimsty technically got the own goal, but it's under pressure from Thuram. And yeah, I mean, that was some phenomenal finishes by Thuram. But yeah, Inter just incredible. And I think that they are the reason why we expect them to be in a Scudetto hunt by the end of the season. And the scary thing about it, Rory, no Zielinski in this squad yet. Yeah. So we're waiting for his introduction to this as well.
Yeah, I think I put in the notes, like, this is kind of feeling like we're getting towards final form in Zaghi ball. Like, we're finally, like, this is his third season now, right? Third season, fourth season. Yeah. And I feel like he's getting just those final little touches and those little, like, the way the players switch positionally and the patterns of play are just, it's something that I watched and I was like, oh, fuck, Arsenal have got to play these. Like, this is going to be like, they're hands down one of the best teams in Europe, like hands down. And when they put on a performance like this, they're one of the most beautiful teams to watch in Europe. Like, they're just breathtaking at times. And I think this was one of those performances where he just sat back, and I think Gasperini would have just been like afterwards, like, fuck, that's a proper team we just played there. Like, and I think these players have been playing together a very long time now. Like, they've all been together for roughly a season, right? Or if not longer, right? That bloody Barella, Çalhanoğlu, Mkhitaryan midfield has got 2 seasons together now, right? That defense pretty much has got in their second season together. Like, it all feels just very together, very worked out. Lautaro and Thuram, if they can keep improving that partnership, there's not a better partnership in Europe, I don't think, if they can keep that going. So I think, yeah, just absolutely breathtaking from Inter. For Atalanta, a little bit alarming. I think. Now, obviously, if we talk about Inter, all these players have played together, they all know each other so well. Atalanta's kind of the opposite side of the coin. If we just look at the start, like Retegui joined this summer, Brescianini joined this summer, Samardzic joined this summer, Bellanova joined this summer. A lot of these players are new, right? Is this the issue at Atalanta, that it's just a bit of growing pains, getting used to kind of Gasparini's system, or do you think there's something a bit more deep rooted here?
Quite possibly. I think that's a good point that you make. Was if you think about it, that's the front five for Atalanta, so they're not adjusted to the style of Atalanta football. They know about it, and probably hasn't had the same spin. I think what was alarming for me, Rory, was his comments about Zaniolo recently, saying that they invested in Zaniolo and they don't think they can change or manipulate Zaniolo, which, you know, he did the same kind of comments about Scamacca, you know, in terms of application, etc. Whether this is his kind of way of saying shape up or ship out, basically, I'm hoping it is the kind of maybe the morale boosting, just get yourself into a position where you can perform for me, because otherwise you're out of the door. But it's a bit worrying for Zaniolo, because this is kind of seen as this last chance saloon, I would say, in football in general, because he's had a terrible time. He got himself back into position, but never really proved himself at Villa, and then got himself sold off to Atalanta, and we were expecting maybe better things for him. So yeah, a bit of a gamble there. That's maybe not likely to pay off, unfortunately. But I think with Retegui's shown in goals, he can do it for him. It's just, like you say, the rest of that team potentially just gelling at this moment in time. Obviously, Karnaseki didn't follow himself in much glory in this particular match as well, which is a bit harsh on him as well. But yeah, I think it is bedding in time. And I think a lot of us would expect Atalanta to be pushing into the top half of the table by the end of it. So I'm not overly concerned, but I think my predictions are right in the sense that I didn't have them in the top four. I had them outside of it. And I think I'm justified at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. Again, this game isn't really going to define their season away to Inter, but I think the manner of it, 4-0, 2-0 in the first 10 minutes, a little bit of concern, but Atalanta will be fine. Well, guys, before we do a little bit of transfer nonsense, just to take you through the rest of the weekend, Torino continued their incredible start to the season with a 1-0 win over Venezia, a Coco goal in the 86th minute to get all 3 points there. Bologna and Empoli drew 1-1. Ghiazzi for Empoli here was absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed that performance from him. Lecce got a clutch 1-0 win against Cagliari despite being down to 10 men. Kustovic, I think it was, who got the goal. Yeah, Kustovic, who got the goal.
I think so,
Massive goal there. Genoa lost 2-0 to Verona. That's a bit of a surprise result. I think I expected Girona to do better at home there. Fiorentina came from 2-0 down against Monza. Difficult start for Palladino to the season. But Moise Kean, again, Adam, big goal there. Having a bit of a start at Fiorentina, but it's not going well for Palladino, right?
It's not looking very good. Unfortunately, I do fear the worst for Palladino. He has to change either the personnel or the formation at the moment. Something's not working for them. Unfortunately, though, Rory, when you look at the caliber that they've got on the bench as well, that's I think the frustrating bit from a Fiorentina fan perspective is they can see the players' qualities that they're coming off the bench, for example, but they don't understand why they're not in the first 11. You know, you could maybe forgive Yassin Adli, recently transferred from Milan. However, the rest of the personnel, you're not saying to me Paresi doesn't get into this squad. I don't know what he needs to do to prove himself. It almost feels like Palladino's kind of made his judgment on certain players. You know, De Gea had a great day in Europe, for example, but then gets dropped in for this match for Terracciano. For me, De Gea is better than Terracciano in many respects. So again, just some strange decisions. Whether it's Palladino trying to find his feet, we'll see, but he needs to get some results sharpish, because I think the fan base is getting very frustrated at what is perceived to be much of the same under Italiano. So let's see.
And if you've not seen the Maldini goal, hell of a goal.
Oh, beautiful.
How Milan let him go for free, by the way, is criminal. He is a very, very good player. Hell of a goal from him. And the final game was Udinese 1-0 against Como. Brenner in the 43rd minute. Udinese continue their very good start to the season. Como continue their very bad start to the season. So, Adam, before we go, let's talk a little bit of transfer business. Transfer deadline day happened. I think the only deal that caught my eye that I was like, this is intriguing, and we've seen them both on the pitch already, was Tammy Abraham's swap for Sailormakers. Is an interesting one. Tammy Abraham looked very, very good in that Milan kit. That's all I can say. It seemed to suit him. Who do you think got the better deal out of that? Because I'm still trying to figure it out. I feel like it might be Milan, but I'm not sure.
I think in the long run, it'll be Salamakers to Roma. I think that will come out good. However, yeah, you're right. I think he did some great hold-up play. Potentially, if he does a lot of that, that will force him into the reckoning of the squad. I think he needed a break. He needed a new club, new environment, and potentially that is the kind of opportunity for him. So, yeah, good move there. I think the business that Napoli have done generally is what's caught my eye. Billy Gilmore, for example, Scott McTominay been brought in. Obviously, Lukaku coming back, but I think we've both said it. Buongiorno is probably the signing of this window potentially. I was a bit disappointed at how so far Colpani is doing at Fiorentina. I was expecting him to potentially push on. We'll wait and see. That might be a player that within time gets better. I've said about the likes of Filip Marvinski at Lecce. I think that's an interesting bit of business. He hasn't necessarily played so far, so keep an eye out on that. Otherwise, yeah, I think the only late one that came out was Sebastian Velkovic, who left Empoli before the end of the window to Torino for 5 million euros. That could be an interesting kind of replacement for Buongiorno, because he's seen as someone that's getting better as time goes by. So keep an eye on him. I'm just trying to have a look at the other signatures that did take place. There hasn't been too many, right?
No, I wanted to very quickly talk about Gilmore and McTominay. I find it really interesting and intriguing how they're going to fit into that team, because I think we've just seen that Anguissa and Lobotka were very good, and neither of those players you can see really being dropped. I'm intrigued as to where it's going to be. Obviously, the Conte 3-5-2, so you're going to need that three in the middle, but I'm intrigued. Where do you see Gilmore and McTominay fitting in? Are they going to play together? Is it going to be one and the other? I just don't. Is it just for squad depth? Because they've not got European football this year, so I just don't see where they fit in. I think they're good signings, but
I think generally Billy Gilmore gets himself into the squad. I think he will be in free alongside Anguissa as well as Lobotka for certain games, not for every game, but certain games. With Scott McTominay, he's an interesting one. He could be the player that sits just behind the solitary striker, or he could be maybe the Mazzocchi side, because he was originally played for Man United as a right winger. So there could be something in that. But I think Conte sees his tenacity, his ability to break through the box. I think he's likely to play just behind the likes of a Lukaku. But you never know. He might play in a rotational kind of aspect with Anguissa. I mean, at some point, Anguissa is going to need a break as well. I think it wouldn't surprise me. Look, he looks at the depth and went, we want to potentially win the Coppa Italia, potentially. That would be a great opportunity for both of them. I'm personally looking forward to what both could do. I think Gilmore's more likely of the two to be on a regular basis, though. But we'll wait and see. We'll see how Conte plays it. But what about you? Do you think that's going to be the kind of vibes, or do you reckon they'll be rotated?
No, I think you're probably right. I think we'll see McTominay off the bench a lot. I think we'll see him off the bench a lot, and I think we've seen him. Well, I don't know, United let him go. I'm still not sure how I feel about it, but I think him off the bench was always a kind of joker up the sleeve, right? And I think they're both really going to enjoy their time in Naples, and the Napoli fans are going to absolutely love him. I'm really excited just to see how it goes. I think Gilmore has got Serie A written all over him. I think he'll go to it like a duck to water. Honestly, I think he'll be fantastic. I'm just a little bit Scott McTominay has to decide where I think we're going to see him. But yeah, fantastic moves for both of them. I'm super, super excited. I'm super excited for them. I really love those moves. And also the last one, I don't know how much we're going to see of him, but I think he might be the next Bisek, is Thomas Palacios, who's come in at Inter, the young centre-back from Independiente in Argentina, I think it is. They bought him for $6.5 million. I don't think we're going to see much of him this year, maybe a bit in the Coppa, but a player that could be worth keeping an eye on, because by all accounts, a very, very exciting young centre-back. So I think Inter may have done some very clever scouting again in Argentina with that Zanetti hookup. and they may have just got their next centre-back. So it could be one worth keeping an eye on there for. But good. Guys, that is us done for this week. There is some international football. We'll be doing something for the international football. Keep an eye on our social media platforms. Adam, anything to say before I let the listener go home?
If you haven't already done so, make sure you check out our Premier League edition as well, where we talk about a lot of the games that took place over the weekend. But apart from that, check us out on the socials.
You can find us for the socials on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram and TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button down here somewhere. If you're on your podcast, give us a follow, give us a rating, and most importantly, enjoy the rest of your week, guys. We will see you next time. Alla prossima.
Ciao, ciao.